Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. Welcome to my new video.
Mikey's Production Tips is brought to you by CinemaSpice, After Effects tool.
Yes, CinemaSpice. Blah, blah, blah. You've heard it before. Anyways, go there. Cool stuff. Let's get into this tutorial, which is a little bit different than I've done before. What I want to do is I want to take something that's really simple to do on your own, as in what we're doing is we're making a call out or a button or a flag, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to take that process, which is simple to do. You draw something, you put a number in it, and let's make it complicated. Okay, hear me out. We're making it complicated now so it could be simple later. We're going to take this and rig it all up, which is going to take a lot of effort up front. But if you ever need to use this in the future over and over and over and over again, this will be easier in the long run. And what it's going to start with is a piece of paper. So what we're going to be creating is a call out or a sign or a flag, whatever you want to call them. But basically we're going to have a box with a little arrow on it, and we're going to put in some numbers. Something along the lines of that. Now, bear with me, my artistic ability on paper and pencil is not the best. But anyways, this is where I like to sit down and figure out exactly what I want it to do, how the controls need to work, and so and how it needs to all fit together. What we've got here is two things. We have what this box is, which is going to be made out of shape layers. And then we have the numbers here, which are going to be, of course, text. So that's two layers, and what I want to do is I want to make it so on the shape layer itself, there's the controllers that you can do many things. One of them which is a layer control. So layer, and that layer control, what you do is then you whip that text layer, and it'll automatically sync up this where that text is. It'll parent it. It'll do all the stuff where, say, this word here is a lot longer. It'll automatically scale the box to fit it and all that kind of stuff. So what I want this to do is, one, I want to scale box to fit that text. Two, I want to parent position to that as well, so I can move that text layer around and this call out box will just fit with it. So those are the two goals of what this is. Now, as far as controls, we want to do several things. Again, so we have this box. Let's do a different number this time, 400. So the controls we want are one, layer control. We'll just call it LC. Two, we want some sort of padding. And what that padding is the amount of space from here, you know, left and right, up and down, around the word to the box. Next thing we want to do is we want to be able to expand the box. Okay, so pad. We want to be able to expand the box horizontally and vertically a little bit more, just in case we want to have more control over it. So we want your expand width and expand height. And then we also want to be able to move. That's the worst eraser in the world. Okay, let's draw another box. We want to be able to move this text layer within side of this shape layer that way, or that way, or that way, or that way, and be able to keep everything also in sync. Now remember, when we layer control this, it's automatically gonna move the position of that shape layer to where it fits with that text layer. So we're gonna need to have some controls here, so we can have a left, right control, and an up, down control. And then next is this point. We need to have a control where that point position is. Say we want to have it on this side or right in the middle. So point position, And then also, we are wanting to do the size of this point. Say we want this point to be really big or really small. So PS for point size, not postscript. So that's kind of all the stuff we need. So I'm gonna take this middle section here and start figuring out what we want to do as far as a control. Because I'm gonna build this using a tool from AE Scripts, which I love. It's called the Pseudo Effects Creator, and it's amazing of creating controllers for your projects like this, for your rigs. And I use it all the time. One of my most used scripts that comes from AE Scripts. Anyways, just put out a little shout out for that. And what I wanna start with is at the top, have the layer control picker. And that will be a drop down menu that you can pop open and pick the layer. Then after that, I want to have the shape. So control the shape and position of the box. So I'm gonna have probably a folder, and that folder could be just called setup, something along the lines of that. And inside of that folder, so this is what my controller is going to look like on the layer. Inside of that folder, we would have a slider for padding, and then expand width slider, expand height slider, and then your position of the 40 or the text inside of that, left, right, up, and down. And so they would have two sliders for that. So left, right, and up, down. And this is all in a folder for that original setup folder. Now, we want to have a look setup, a look folder. Inside that look folder, we're going to want to have like color, right? So we can have the color. We can have stroke color, and then stroke size. And these are all going to be sliders. Well, actually, no, this is a color picker, obviously. And the stroke size will be a slider. And then last would be point. And inside of the point, we will have, if we want that point to be a separate color, we can. I don't know why you'd want to do that. Point color. And then point size and point position. Color picker, slider, slider. And that position is like a left and right. So whether it's all the way over here or all the way over here. I think that's it. You know what? Actually, in the setup, we also probably want roundness, because if we want these corners to be round, also with the point color, point size, we can do a point roundness. So now I know my drawings aren't the best, but trust me, doing this on paper first really is going to help the process, make sure I know what I want and kind of how I want the controller to be set up. And that's what we do in After Effects. Let's jump into After Effects. So the first thing I want to do is, well, let's create the controller that we had just sketched out. I just have my paper right here, and so I'm looking at it. But we need to attach that controller to something, so let's just create a shape layer. I'm going to create whatever shape. And because my callout's going to look like something like that, so I'll just create that now, and we can attach the controller to this, and then we can manipulate this shape layer later. The tool I'm using from AE Scripts is called, it's an extension, it's called Pseudo Effect Maker. And if you've never used this, it's really cool, and definitely go check it out. There'll be a link in the description. All right, so here's how it looks. And what we can do with this is, instead of using a bunch of expression controllers and sliders and things like that to build it, we can make it look almost like a plugin. So again, from my sketch, we have the first thing will be the layer control. And so let's add
a layer control, and right now it's default to none. You can also have it default to self, but for this it doesn't matter because we want to pick a separate layer. And so let's give this a name, which would be, well, we got to figure out a name for this rig that we're making. So let's just call it the callout plus, right? Because it's kind of like a callout for that number. So let's call select text layer for that right there. And after this initial layer control, we want to now have a group. Remember, it was a setup group, and we had, I gotta read my handwriting. That's just horrible. Padding, extend your width, extend the height, left, right, up, down, roundness, things like that. So we've got all these different things, angle, checkbox, color, and there's a group. So we can create a group, and inside this group we can have more controls, and then in the controller, once we attach it to this layer, well, you can open and close the group, which is really handy. So in the group, we're going to have the first slider, which will be padding. And what I like about this is you can define the range of the slider. The padding doesn't need to go below 0, so let's have your slider minimum 0, default to, let's say, 10. And we might change that later. Slider max, let's do 100. Minimum value 0, max value, let's do 1,000. Let's do 10,000 just so we have it can go as big as they want. I don't know why you'd have that much pixels for your padding, but there we go. And so that is padding. Next we have extend width, extend height, left and right, up and down, and roundness. Okay, so, and these are all going to be sliders. So next one is extend width. And for this, I want default to be 0, slider max to be 100, minimum value 0, max value 10,000 again. And for this one, and for the next one, it's going to be the same way. So what I can do is I can just duplicate this, which is this button right here. There's the trash, there's the duplicate that, and this next one, let's just go in and extend height. Next, we want the left and right and up and down. And so what I'm thinking for this is, again, a slider. Let's call this left, right. And just like this, where we can move it left or right, but instead of to -10 to +10, let's go -100 to +100. And it'll be, a percentage. So as it goes to +100, it's going to go all the way over to the right. As it goes to -100, it'll go all the way over to the left. If it's -50, it'll be halfway to the left, things like that. So that can default at 0. And again, that's the same thing I want for the next one. So let's duplicate that, but instead let's call this up and down. But actually we probably want down to be this way and up to be that way. So we'll go down/up, just like that. And then the last one will be roundness. Another slider. Doesn't need to go below 0. But let's have that, say like that. And the default, let's say 10. Okay, so you can see that's all in a group, except for that roundness didn't get in that group for some reason. I must have clicked off, and I didn't even give it a name. Let's call this body roundness, because we have the roundness for the little point as well. So I want to now move this into the group, and let's put it up just below padding. And this is something cool, is I can easily move these around to rearrange the order of them. So, and I can name these groups as well. So this group will be shape setup. Okay. Okay, next after shape setup, we should probably do the point next. That makes more sense. In my diagram I sketched out, I did the look of it, but let's do the point next. So another group, and that must have went inside of there. I didn't have it selected, so I can move that out easily. This group will be point setup, and in there we had point color, point roundness, point size, and point position. So the first one, let's make sure we're selecting that group, and there is, where's the color? Color. color checker. And so let's give it a default. Let's find a color we like, and then we'll just use a default. I like blue, and that will be the default color. Now, next we have, let's do roundness, and we can do the same thing. I'm going to just come up here and duplicate this body roundness, and then let's move that down here. Let's call this point roundness. After point roundness, let's do point size and then point position. Point size, again, let's just duplicate this extend width because it'll use the same settings. With point position, it's going to be kind of like this left and right. So because I want it to be all the way to the left or all the way to the right, let's use the same negative 100 to positive 100. Let's duplicate that. But let's call it point position. Looks good. Now, next we have the look. So let's go to another group. And of course, I didn't. There it is. For some reason, I keep on forgetting to unselect. We'll call that look. And inside, you know what we should actually do? Let's put the point roundness, or actually the point color inside of look. And then we can have the body color as well. So let's duplicate that. And then duplicate that again for stroke color. And then stroke size. Let's just duplicate that point size because it'll use the same settings. Okay, so that is the main controller. I think I have everything that we had talked about. Now I can also save this if I want to, save this controller I've made, but it remembers the last controller you made. So if I were to close this Pseudo Effects Maker down, open back up, this callout plus would still be there. I want to attach it to the layer, so make sure my shape layer is connected or selected, and then this plus button right there, that will just attach it, just like that. So now we have this control. These are blank. This does nothing right now. But what I can do is I can attach all my expressions that drives us to these. This is just like a really complex expression controller at this point. But now I have this to be able to drive everything, and it's going to work awesome. The other benefit of creating this controller first is it gives you an order of operations. So we can start at the top and get this layer select to work, and then we can start on padding and the roundness and just kind of work our way that way. And if I decide to make some little changes, it'll be easier to make little changes on this than to make a whole new controller. So this is great. So let's start with the select text layer effect. So let's actually add in a new text layer. So let's say 400. Make it white. If that's white, then let's change that solid background to a different kind of off-white, just so we'll be able to see it still if I move it around. So shape layer, let's call this callout plus, just so we know what it is. And let's select that 400. And it does nothing now, but it will in the future. So what we want to do is you need to make sure that the anchor point for the text is centered. And so there's a hotkey for that. Command Option Home will center that anchor point into the middle of the text. Or I'm not sure what it is on Windows, but on Mac it's Command Option Home. And so that'll center that text. And if you don't do that, then there's really, because a lot of things are going to be based off of where the anchor point is in the text, and so if it's not centered, things are going to get a little weird because of that. Let's first work on position. So what we want is, no matter where this callout is, I want it to sync up to where the position of that 400 is. And so that's an expression we're going to be adding to the position of the layer. So that's under Transform, Position. So I'm going to Alt or Option click on the stopwatch. And then what we're going to do is use this pick whip and pick whip up here where it says Select Text Layer. And then we're going to add just dot position. So it selects that text layer dot position and it automatically puts it there. So now when I move this text layer around, that callout will stick with it. What's also cool about this is, let's have another text layer. Let's call this 401. Don't want to get too crazy. If I move this over here, let's go back to that callout plus, and now select that other one. It'll automatically jump to it. Kind of cool. All right. Let's delete that. Now here is the problem. Is if we select none, then the whole thing breaks. So we need to put in some robustness to this, where if for some reason this is selected to none, it's not going to break. And that's using a catch loop. And let's see if I remember how to do this off the top of my head. So we go try curly bracket. It's going to try this. And with a semicolon, curly bracket, and catch in parentheses error, open curly bracket, value. And so what this is saying is it's try this first thing, and if it produces an error, then just put in the main value. Perfect. And so it tried it and it didn't work, so it just kept the value that it originally had. And so this expression we're going to have to put on a lot of things, anything that references this select text layer. Otherwise, if it accidentally gets set to off or none, then it will cause an error, and we don't want that to happen. So that's just a little safety feature. So remember this try catch loop going on. So that's the first thing. The next thing is, let's go ahead and put in a rotation and scale as well. So I'm going to just copy this whole thing, paste it, and instead of position, let's write rotation. Perfect. Scale, same thing. Instead of position, let's write scale. And if you want to change the opacity, we can do that as well. Instead of position. Okay, so now we can scale this up and down. It links it together. We can rotate it. We can even change the opacity. All right. Looks like it's working pretty good for that piece. So that's the first thing, is making sure that it's connected. Next, let's look at padding. And for padding, we need to also make sure that this rectangle is the same size as this text layer. And we're going to use an expression called sourceRectAtTime for that. So let's go into the contents, and let's kind of clean this up a little bit. This rectangle, let's just call this body, because that's what we were calling it. Rectangle path. Let's make sure that is centered right there. The position for the transform body is zeroed out. And then we go into size. And this is where we're going to add this expression. So let's create some variables for this. So W equals, W for width, which is going to be your first one. Let's select that layer because that's referencing that text layer, and we want it to change no matter what text it's selected, so that's awesome. And then we're going to add a period, and then type source, capital R, rect, that's short for rectangle, capital A for at, capital T for time, and then, oh, I put two T's there, for time, and then in parentheses you put nothing, but if you wanted to put a specific time you can, but it doesn't matter with this. We want it to always be referencing it no matter what time it is. And then dot width. And that will get the width of this layer. And with semicolon and then height, it's going to be the same thing. Just copy that. But instead of width, obviously, we type height. And then in square brackets, we type WH. Let's see how that did. Perfect. You see how it goes around this perfectly? And if I come in here and type whatever, it will make it the same size. But again, remember how I said you need to have the anchor point right in the center, so we have to recenter that and it should work fine. Now, one thing you can do is you can see this is left justified. If we center justify that, and then set this up centered. Then as we add more, it should automatically keep it in there. It just depends on how you have it justified. So on the text layer, center justify it, center out the anchor point, and then everything should be working fine. So, but now that we have this, we want to add the padding to it. Remember, we have this padding set at 10. So with this, let's make the padding its own variable. Pad equals, and then we'll grab that padding. And then W plus pad and H plus pad. And something is wrong. Let's see. Oh, I got a 0 there for some reason. There we go. So now as I increase the padding, that will shrink and grow. Great, let's make that nice and big, and let's look at roundness. So right now I've got roundness set at 20. So I can just take this and just link that straight to the body roundness here. 10. There we go. Looking pretty good. Next up, we've got extend width and extend height. This again is going to be another one with the width and height here. So what I want to do is on that W, let's go plus, this is before the semicolon, and let's link to the extend width. And on the height, plus, and pick whip, link to extend height. And so we have extend height, extend width. Perfect. So far, so good. We've got all these. Now, next up is left and right. And this is only going to work when you extend it further. So let's bring the body roundness down, padding down, extend width to, let's say 100. Let's go 500. Extend height, the same thing, 500. And just so we can see it moving around. So left and right, as left goes down to -100, this needs to be all the way over here. Here's the tricky part. Remember that we are linking to the position of the text. So we can't move the text. We have to move the callout box behind the text. So I want to transform the body, and we have position. So right there is 250, which is half of 500. So pretty easy. What we need to do is in this position, let's go and let's take this left and right, and we need to create a variable for that. So let's just call this LR equals left and right. And what we want is we want to turn this into a scalar, a percentage. So we need to times this by 0.01. And of course it's erroring because I haven't really done anything else yet. So the next thing is we need to get the width of this. So NW equals new width. That's what that stands for. So let's get the extend width 500. And I'm going to go ahead and divide this by 2 because that's what I need, is a half of that. And actually I can divide that by 2 and then times this by LR because I need to get a scale of that. So then the new H, new height, equals that divided by 2 times that by du for down up, which is another variable we haven't created yet, which is going to be the same thing as this, but for the other down and up controller. Times that by 0.01. Make sure there's semicolons at the ends of all of these. And if I did this right, this should work. So in square brackets, let's go in W, comma, and H. In square bracket. Okay. Except for I've got it backwards. So to fix that, let's divide that by -2. And it should work now. So left, right. Oh. Sometimes it's just trial and error. So the height is not by negative. There we go. So down, up, left, right. And if it makes more sense for you to have it the other way, like right now I have down, meaning the text is on the down part of the callout, and even though the callout is moving up, that just makes sense to me. If it makes sense for you the other way, you can do it the other way. So again, let's 0 this, 0, 0. There's that. Let's add a little more padding, change the roundness. So that's most of, well, that's that whole shape setup. Now let's go into the point setup. This is going to be a little bit more difficult because I want this point to not move past where that round is, and it needs to be able to scale and fit within it and kind of control it that way. So it's a little bit more you got to do to it, but let's do it. And as you can see in the example, it was just a kind of a point coming down. Let's use, again, this rounded rectangle tool. And let's come in here and call it point. Actually, I want that point to be below the body. Let's make sure this is zeroed out. And then also, I want the rotation to be 45 degrees. If I move the position here in this rectangle, it's not going to move straight. But if I move this one, it will. So we're going to be adding our expressions to this rectangle here, 0, 0. Now there's a roundness on this already, which is at 20. So let's just kind of figure this out. If I move this down right to where I don't want the round to make it past the bend, if that makes, or past the bottom. If it's like this, then you can kind of have it. Actually, I kind of like that. And then if we take the roundness off, yeah, let's do that. Let's keep it round. That makes my life so much easier. So position of this is going to be, well, let's look at the body size. You see that's 131.6. Let's just see what this is. We go down to the point position. 131.6 divided by 2, 65.8. So that's what we need to do, is we need to connect to that body size, that second one, and just divide it by 2. And it'll always be there at the bottom. So position. We got width, and let's just set width to 0 right now. Height, and let's set that to, remember we're picking that body position, that second one. Divide that by 2, semicolon, and then square brackets WH. Okay, working pretty good. Now let's move this from left to right, and that's actually the point roundness. Let's connect that. We didn't do that yet. That's in the rectangle path. Point roundness. Connect to point roundness. Point size. Oh, look at this. See, point size we have set at 0. And if I connect to that, then it's going to be set at 0. So that's something that we'll want to change the defaults on the controller. So the default we'll probably want to be 30. And then 5 for the point roundness. That looks pretty good. And so let me show you how to change the defaults. Let's open up that extension again, Pseudo Effect Maker. And then so the point roundness, let's go down here to point, set up point roundness. Let's set that to 5. Point size we have at 30. And point position, let's have it all the way over to the right. So we'll set that at 100. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this callout, and it's going to break all of the expressions. But then if I just re-add it, oh, see what we did here? We forgot to put in that expression that checks for errors. So right now, if I select that, it's fine. And select that, it's fine. Select none. There's the errors. Okay. So because for this, we are checking the layer control. So let's go in and add, try this, curly bracket, catch in parentheses error, curly bracket, value, end curly bracket. And that one fixed that. All right. Looks like that's the only one that we need that expression on so far. And I can't remember if we need it on others later, but we'll just keep our eye out for that. Okay, we got the body, we got the point, and the next part of the point, we have these defaults set. That's great. We want point position to be 100, which is all the way over here. So if we change the position, well, let's go into the point position. Let's close these down. And to just test this, I'm going to change this from 0 to that first value, which means now I can move this over and over, right? So we want it to go right to where that curve starts. What I don't want is I don't want it to go past the curve, like that. So right to where that curve is, so that's 104. Let's figure out based off of the body and the roundness, right? So this body is 261, roundness is set to 10, and then also the size of this point, which is set to 30. So let's bring up the calculator so if we know what's going on, it's easier to do it. So we got 261 divided by 2, 130, minus, this is the roundness, 10, minus that point, which was 30, divided by 2 is 15. So 105.5, where are we at, 104? Yeah, that's about where it needs to be. So what we did is let's put that in here. So let's grab that piece, divided by 2, minus the size, divided by 2, minus the roundness of the body, which is set to 10. And end with a semicolon. And that's all the way over there. So the width, but that's actually not exactly what we want because now we can't change that. That's just locked to that end, and we want to be able to change it with this point position, with this. So we need to have a scalar, kind of how we did with the other one. So let's go up to the top, and PP equals this times 0.01, and then W times PP. Excellent. So now that slides all the way across. Now the test for this is if we add more zeros, it should stick it right there. Excellent, it does. Point size. All right, something is not quite right. Point size isn't working. Okay, so here's the problem, is I have this sideways. So the size is not the size. I have this size at, where is that at? 140, but it's not 140 across because it's 140 this way. So I need to use the Pythagorean theorem to be able to find out what this diagonal is. And that's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So let's say if it was 100. So 100 times 100 times 2. So we're at 20,000, and then the square root of that is 141. So divided by 100 is 1.41111. And I'm going to just do that instead of try to create some sort of equation to make it absolutely perfect. I'm going to just put this number in here because it's always going to be square and it's always going to work that way. So 1.414. Let's do that. So it's on this width, the rectangle right here, this one. Content rectangle path divided by 2 for the point. We're going to put this in parentheses. times 1.414. There we go, and that now fixes that issue. Okay, and the last thing is the look. So point color, body color, stroke size. We don't have a stroke yet, but we can add that in. Let's first do the point color and body color. Now I put the point below just in case we want to have a different color. I don't want it to be on top of that. So let's first do the body color, and let's just connect the fill color to body color, and you can see that's kind of how that will look with a different point color. Let's go into the point, to the fill color, connect that to the point color, stroke color. Now we don't have a stroke yet, and it's gonna break it in order to create this stroke. So we're gonna have to relink some stuff. I should have done this to begin with, but I didn't, and sometimes that's how things work, is because we need to stick the body and the point inside of a group. And as soon as we stick that in the group, all of the expressions are going to be wrong. Let's call this the group, and this will be the callout, body and point. Stick that in there, and you can see things broke. But luckily, they make it fairly easy to identify the errors. So let's just click on this first one, and this is a big one. I'm going to make some more room here. So this first one, callout plus point position, that should be fine. But this one here, content body, rectangle path 0. We need to redo that. And so what you see is it says content callout dot content body. So I'm going to take this content dot callout and copy that. And anywhere where it says content body, right here, content body, I'm going to add that before it. Right here also where it says content point, we're going to need that as well. All right. And that looks like that is the only places that broke. But what this allows me to do now that I have this all in a group is let's add a stroke just to the group. You can see stroke here adds a stroke right around it. Looks great too. So let's stroke color to that, stroke width to the stroke size. Now I'm looking at this, and I probably want to change the stroke color default and the stroke size default as well. So we're going to open back up the Pseudo Effect Maker, and the stroke color, let's default that to white. The stroke size, well, let's see what size works. Come in here, stroke size. Let's do 10. Stroke default size to 10. Okay. So now again, we delete this callout plus. It's going to give us an error. We add the new one back, and everything should be good. All right. Now I'm just playing around to make sure everything works. And I think we have it. Okay. So here's the test. Let's duplicate this layer, put it over here, and let's have this be a different number. And if we were to come out to callout plus and then select that one, boom, everything transfers over. And we have all sorts of controls. Let's change the point color to something different. Say just a darker version of that blue. That looks pretty good. So I think I'm done. Now that took a long time, and this was a long tutorial, and there's a lot to this. But here's the deal. I'm all done with this now. I can save this as a preset, which is super simple. What you'd want to do is go down into your callout plus layer, select contents, select effects, and select transform, because we have stuff on all of that. Effect, or go to animation, save animation preset, and then you can recall this anytime and then select the text layer. So if I was doing something where I need to do this over and over and over and over and over again, sure, I can just animate this by hand and create the box around it once or twice. It's going to be easy, but after a while, it's going to get tedious. And this makes it super simple to do repetitive tasks. And that's what computers are great at. So I'm hoping you learned a lot from this. This is something I love to do, is rig things up to make it easier for other people to do their work. And so, one, hopefully you learned a lot from this, and two, if you need some of this work done, don't hesitate to reach out and let's talk about if this is something I can do for you. So thank you so much for watching, and hopefully you enjoyed this long tutorial. And I'd love to hear some comments. Put them down below, and we'll see you next time.